Light exploded through the lab. Not harmful light, but brilliant and overwhelming. The sphere rose into the air, spinning faster and faster. The symbols on its surface rearranged themselves into new patterns. Then suddenly the room filled with holographic projections. Stars. Hundreds of thousands of stars, each one marked with glowing symbols. But most of the symbols were red. Dead signals. Abandoned worlds. Empty colonies. The map was a graveyard of Ember's civilization, showing the slow extinction of her people across millennia. But near the edge of the projection, one symbol glowed green. One active signal impossibly far away on the other side of the galaxy. They are still out there, Wells whispered. Not many, but some survived. There is a colony still active. Ember stared at the green symbol with an intensity that made the air feel electric. Her whole body trembled. Hope and longing radiated from her like heat from a star. She made a sound that was pure joy mixed with heartbreak. Her people existed. They were real. And they were so impossibly far away. That's a 3-year journey at maximum warp, Drake said, calculating the distance. No Federation ship would make that trip for a single passenger. Then we build her a ship, Oliver said. Everyone turned to look at him. The janitor who had started all of this with a simple act of kindness shrugged. We have the resources. We have the expertise. And if there was ever a being who deserved to go home, it's her. That would cost millions, Harrison protested. Then we fundraise, Rachel said. Tell Ember's story. The whole galaxy will want to help once they know. Tommy looked up at Ember. You're going to find your family. You're going to have a happy ending, just like in the comics. Ember touched Tommy's face with the tip of one claw, gentle as a whisper. Her eyes said what her voice could not. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that kindness exists even in the darkest places. You are my family too. Over the following months, Helios Station became famous not for the Krynn attack, but for the dragon who lived there. Ember's story spread across the Federation networks. Donations poured in from thousands of worlds. Engineers volunteered their time. Xenobiologists studied her physiology to design a ship that could sustain her for the long journey. And every evening, Tommy still brought comic books to read with her, teaching her about human stories of hope and heroism. Dr. Wells made numerous discoveries studying Ember. The dragon's scales could regenerate almost infinitely. Her body processed energy in ways that defied conventional physics. She could survive in vacuum without protection. She was in every sense a biological marvel. But Wells treated her with respect and friendship, never as just a specimen. Captain Drake's daughter visited often, bringing her own dragon collection to show Ember. The two became friends, bonded by their shared love of fantasy stories. Rachel taught Ember about earth plants, and the dragon showed surprising interest in botany. Oliver continued his evening visits, though now he brought better food than protein bars. Even Harrison eventually warmed to Ember, though he never fully admitted it. When his daughter was sick and the station's medical supplies ran low, Ember used her fire to synthesize compounds from raw materials that saved the girl's life. Harrison looked at the dragon differently after that. Construction of Ember's ship took 8 months. It was a marvel of engineering. A vessel designed specifically for a being who could breathe fire and fly through space on her own, but needed protection for such a long journey. They called it the Homeward Flame. The day of Ember's departure, the entire station gathered at the docking bay. Tommy stood at the front of the crowd, trying very hard not to cry. You will write to me, right? Tommy asked. The ship has communication equipment. You can send messages, Ember nodded. She had learned to manipulate a specialized interface that Wells had designed, allowing her to type messages in human language. Her first words had been, "Thank you for giving me hope. And you will tell me all about your people when you find them?" Tommy continued. Another nod. "And you will remember the comics and the stories?" Ember pulled Tommy into a careful embrace, wrapping her wings around him. She made her happy sound, then pulled back and touched a claw to Tommy's chest right over his heart. The gesture meant, "I will remember. Always." One by one, the people of Helios Station said their goodbyes. Rachel hugged the dragon's leg, the closest she could get to a proper embrace. Oliver shook her claw formally, then lost his composure and hugged her too. Wells gave her a datapad loaded with human literature and science texts. Drake presented her with an honorary security badge, making her an official protector of the station. Even Harrison, stern and proper to the end, bowed respectfully to her. Then Ember boarded the homeward flame. The ship was beautiful, its hull decorated with images from Tommy's comic books. Captain Nova flying alongside a dragon, the Starbound Chronicles crew waving goodbye. Crimson the dragon breathing fire and lightning, all of Tommy's heroes, immortalized on the vessel that would carry their inspiration home. The docking bay doors opened to reveal the stars. Ember's ship lifted smoothly, guided by the navigation system linked to the Praxis sphere. It turned slowly, orienting toward that distant green signal, toward the family she had searched for across centuries. Tommy pressed his hand against the viewport. Through the ship's windows he saw Ember looking back at him. She raised one claw in farewell. Then the homeward flame's engines flared to life, and the ship accelerated away from the station, moving faster and faster until it became just another point of light among countless stars. "She's going to make it," Tommy said, wiping his eyes. "She's going to find them and be happy. That's how good stories end." Rachel put her arm around her son. "Thanks to you, you gave her the courage to keep hoping." "No," Tommy said. "She gave me that. She taught me that even when you're alone and scared and think nobody cares, there are always friends waiting to be found. You just have to be brave enough to share your stories." Oliver stood beside them, looking out at the stars. He thought about that first night when he had found a lonely dragon in an abandoned cargo bay. He had offered half a sandwich and gotten a miracle in return. The universe was full of impossible things, he realized. Dragons and kindness, loneliness and connection. Endings that became beginnings. Ember dropped into the atrium like a meteor wrapped in scales and fury. She landed on top of 3 Krynn warriors, crushing them under her weight. Her tail swept out, sending 5 more flying across the room. Her wings spread wide, creating a barrier between the security team and the invaders. And when she opened her mouth, fire poured out. Not metaphorical fire. Real, actual flames that turned the air into a burning inferno. The Krynn screamed. Some tried to shoot her, but their energy weapons bounced off her scales like raindrops. Others tried to run, but Ember was everywhere at once, moving with impossible speed for something so large. She was not killing them, Drake noticed. She was disabling them, breaking weapons and armor, sending them fleeing back toward their boarding pods. But the Krynn leader was not fleeing. He stared at Ember with his one organic eye wide with recognition and horror. "No," he whispered. The ancient text spoke of them. The Star Guardians. They died out millennia ago. Ember's head swung toward him and her golden eyes blazed with inner light. She made a sound that was not quite a roar and not quite speech, something between the two that carried meaning Drake could feel in his bones. It said, "I am still here, and you are not welcome." The Krynn leader stumbled backward, then turned and ran. His remaining warriors followed, abandoning their attack without a second thought. Ember pursued them to the breach, ensuring they made it back to their pods. Within minutes, the Krynn ships were disengaging from the station and jumping back into warp space. The attack was over. The station was safe, and everyone had seen what happened. Ember turned back to face the crowd of humans who had witnessed her defense. Station personnel stared at her with expressions ranging from terror to awe. Some had their weapons still raised. Others had dropped them entirely. The silence in the atrium was profound. Then Tommy pushed through the crowd. Rachel tried to grab him, but he was too fast. He ran straight toward Ember, his small figure looking impossibly tiny next to the massive dragon. "You did it," Tommy shouted, his voice breaking the silence. "You were so brave." Just like Captain Nova in issue 12. Ember lowered her head to Tommy's level. The boy wrapped his arms around her snout in an embrace that looked ridiculous and touching at the same time. The dragon's eyes closed and she made that musical sound she reserved for moments of happiness. The crowd's fear began to dissolve. If an 8-year-old child could embrace this creature, if she had just saved them all from the Krynn, then maybe she was not a monster after all. Dr. Patricia Wells pushed through the crowd, her scientific curiosity overriding any fear. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 30 years studying alien biology, but she had never seen anything like Ember. "Incredible," Wells whispered, approaching slowly. "Captain Drake, is this what you called me about?" "Yes," Drake said, "though the circumstances have changed somewhat." Wells stopped a respectful distance from Ember. "May I approach?" she asked, speaking directly to the dragon. Ember studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Wells came closer, her scanner already active and collecting data. Your cellular structure is unlike anything in the database. Your scales contain trace elements that should not exist in this sector of space, and your energy signature matches radiation patterns from the Praxis ruins. She looked up at Ember with sudden understanding. You are not just any dragon. You are from their civilization. The people who built those ruins. Ember's eyes widened. She made an urgent questioning sound. You are trying to get home, Wells continued. But your home does not exist anymore, does it? Your people are gone. The Praxis civilization collapsed thousands of years ago. She paused, reading something on her scanner. No, wait. Not collapsed. They left. There was an exodus. Your entire species departed this region of space for reasons unknown, and you were left behind. Ember's head lowered. The sorrow in her posture was unmistakable. Tommy hugged her tighter. How long have you been alone? Wells asked gently. Ember held up one claw and extended 3 talons, then closed them and extended them again, over and over. The gesture was clear. Centuries. She had been alone for centuries, traveling from world to world, searching for her people, finding only ruins and silence. The crowd stood in stunned silence. This dragon was not a monster or a threat. She was a survivor, the last of her kind, wandering the cosmos alone, looking for a home that no longer existed. Rachel found her voice first. Then she needs a new home, here, with us. Absolutely not, a sharp voice cut through the atrium. Administrator Harrison Chen strode through the crowd, his face red with anger and fear. Harrison was Tommy's uncle, Rachel's brother-in-law and the station's chief administrator. He was also a man who valued order and regulation above all else. This creature is dangerous, Harrison continued. It just destroyed half our atrium. We have no idea what it is capable of or what diseases it might carry. It needs to be contained immediately and transferred to a proper research facility. She saved us, Tommy shouted at his uncle. The Krynn would have hurt everyone. That does not change the fact that it is an unregistered alien species, Harrison said. Dr. Wells, I am ordering you to sedate that creature and prepare it for transport. Wells crossed her arms. I don't take orders that violate ethical protocols. This being is clearly sentient and intelligent. We cannot treat her like a specimen. Then I will call in Federation quarantine teams, Harrison said. They will make the decision for us. Ember stood slowly. Her eyes fixed on Harrison, and for a moment Oliver thought she might attack. But instead she simply turned and walked toward the breach in the wall, preparing to leave. Wait, Tommy cried, running after her. You can't go. Where will you go? Ember paused at the edge of the breach, looking out at the stars beyond. She made a low, mournful sound that needed no translation. Nowhere. She had nowhere left to go. I have an idea, Wells said suddenly. The Praxis artifacts we recovered. They included what appears to be a navigation device. We have not been able to activate it because we lacked the proper biological signature to interface with the technology. But if Ember is truly from that civilization, her genetics might be the key. Harrison scowled. That technology is Federation property. That technology belongs to Ember's people, Wells countered. And if it can help her find others like her, then we have a moral obligation to let her try. Drake stepped forward. I support Dr. Wells' recommendation. That dragon saved my station and my people. The least we can do is help her. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Station personnel who had just watched Ember risk herself for them nodded their support. Even some of the security team spoke up in her favor. Harrison looked around at the faces of his constituents and realized he was losing this battle. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. But this happens under controlled conditions in the research lab. If that creature shows any signs of aggression, we sedate her immediately. She has a name, Tommy said firmly. Her name is Ember, and she is my friend. Harrison looked at his nephew with an expression that softened slightly. Very well, Ember, but my conditions stand. Ember turned back from the breach. She looked at Tommy, then at Wells, then at the crowd of humans who had gone from fearing her to defending her in the span of minutes. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. She bowed her head in a gesture of gratitude and agreement. An hour later, they gathered in the station's xenobiology lab. The room had been cleared of everything except the Praxis artifacts, which sat on a central table surrounded by scanning equipment. Ember barely fit in the space, her wings pressed tight against her body. Tommy insisted on being present, holding one of Ember's claws. Rachel stood nearby, one hand on her son's shoulder. Oliver, Drake, Wells, and a reluctant Harrison completed the group. The navigation device was a sphere of crystalline material that pulsed with faint inner light. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that hurt to look at too long because they seemed to shift and change position. Based on my analysis, Wells explained, this device functions as a map and communicator combined. It should show the locations of other Praxis settlements or ships, but it requires a biological connection to activate. Ember reached out and touched the sphere. Ember hesitated, then slowly reached toward one of the comic books on the floor. She picked up an issue that Tommy had brought last week, one about a lost traveler trying to find their way home. She held it up for Drake to see, then pointed at a particular panel. It showed the traveler looking up at the stars, homesick and afraid. The gesture was clear. Ember was lost, far from home, searching for something she could not find. Drake's expression softened. You're trying to get home, aren't you? Ember nodded, and the sound she made was pure sorrow. Then maybe we can help with that, Drake said. But we have to do this properly. Dr. Wells will want to examine you, ask questions, document everything. It won't be comfortable, but I give you my word that no one will hurt you. Can you accept that? Ember looked at Tommy. The boy took her massive claw in his small hands. It'll be okay, Tommy said. Dr. Wells is nice. She helped me with my science project last year. And if anyone tries to be mean to you, I'll tell everyone about how you saved us from the bad guys. What bad guys? Drake asked, confused. The ones who are coming, Tommy said matter-of-factly. That's what happens next in every story. The dragon is always peaceful until the real bad guys show up. And then she has to be brave and protect everyone. Drake and Rachel exchanged worried glances. But before anyone could respond, the station's alarm system blared to life. Red lights flashed throughout the cargo bay, and an automated voice filled the space. Alert. Multiple unidentified vessels approaching Helios Station. All personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill, Drake's communicator crackled. Captain, we have a situation. 6 ships just dropped out of warp space near the station. They're not responding to hails, and their weapons are charging. Configuration matches Krynn scavenger vessels, Drake cursed. The Krynn were notorious pirates who raided remote stations for supplies and salvage. They rarely killed anyone, but they took whatever they wanted and left destruction in their wake. All security teams to defensive positions, Drake ordered into his communicator. He looked at Oliver and Rachel. Get to the evacuation zones. Take the boy. What about Ember? Tommy asked. She stays here where she's hidden, Drake said. Those doors are sealed. The Krynn won't find her, but Ember was already moving. She pushed past Drake with surprising speed, her wings unfurling as she headed toward the cargo bay doors. Wait, Oliver shouted. You can't go out there. They'll see you. Ember paused at the doorway and turned back. Her golden eyes found Tommy's, and she made a sound that was both fierce and gentle. Then she was gone, moving through the corridors with purpose. She's going to fight, Tommy said, just like in the comics. The dragon always protects her friends. Drake ran after Ember, his security team scrambling to follow. Rachel held Tommy close as explosions rocked the station. The Krynn had begun their attack, and somewhere in the chaos, a dragon who had been hiding in the shadows was about to remind the universe why her kind had once been feared across 1,000 worlds. The story that Tommy had been reading, the one about heroes and sacrifice, was about to become very, very real. The Krynn boarding pod struck Helios Station like meteors, punching through the outer hull in 6 different locations. Alarms shrieked as emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off breach sections. Civilians screamed and ran toward evacuation points while security teams scrambled to defensive positions. The station shuddered under the impact, lights flickering as power systems struggled to compensate. Oliver had grabbed Tommy and Rachel, pulling them toward the nearest shelter, when they heard the sound. A roar that shook the metal walls. It came from somewhere above them, echoing through the ventilation shafts and corridors. It was not human. It was not any sound the station's systems could produce. It was primal and powerful and filled with fury. Ember had entered the fight. Captain Drake reached the main atrium just as the first wave of Krynn warriors poured through a breach in the east wall. They were tall reptilian creatures with mottled green skin and forearms, each clutching weapons that crackled with energy. Their leader, a scarred veteran with one eye replaced by a mechanical implant, surveyed the station's defenders with contempt. Surrender your valuables and nobody dies, the Krynn leader hissed. We know you have artifacts from the Praxis excavation, Give them to us, and we leave peacefully. This station is under the protection of the Federation, Drake shouted back, his plasma rifle trained on the Krynn. Leave now, and we won't pursue charges. The Krynn leader laughed, a rasping sound like gravel in a disposal unit. The Federation is 3 days away. We will be gone in 3 hours with everything of value, starting with those Praxis artifacts. The Praxis excavation. Oliver had heard rumors about that. An archaeological team had discovered ruins on a dead planet, remnants of a civilization that had vanished thousands of years ago. They had brought back a few items for study, ancient technology that nobody fully understood. If the Krynn knew about those artifacts, they had been planning this raid for weeks. Fire! Drake ordered. Plasma bolts lit up the atrium. The Krynn returned fire, their energy weapons tearing through walls and equipment. Station security was outnumbered and outgunned. Drake realized with sinking dread that they could not hold the atrium. The Krynn would breach the research levels within minutes. Then the ceiling exploded. Nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. The dragon was real. Massive and impossible and very, very real. It sat in the center of the bay with her son standing beside it, a comic book open in his hands. Oliver stood nearby looking startled by her sudden appearance. But what shocked Rachel most was the scene's normalcy. Tommy was reading to the dragon like it was the most natural thing in the world, and the creature listened with obvious interest. "Mom!" Tommy's face went pale. "I can explain." Rachel could not speak. Her mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. Dragons did not exist. They were myths, stories, fantasy. Yet here was one, sitting in a cargo bay on Helios Station, listening to her 8-year-old son read comic books. "Mrs. Foster," Oliver started, stepping forward with his hands raised. "Please don't panic. I know this looks insane, but Ember hasn't hurt anyone. She's been here for months just hiding and resting. She's peaceful." "Ember," Rachel's voice came out as a whisper. "That's what I call her," Tommy said. "She likes it." "Mom, please, you can't tell anyone. They'll take her away. They'll hurt her." The dragon, Ember, had gone very still, her golden eyes fixed on Rachel with an expression that looked almost like resignation. Like she had been through this before and knew how it would end. That expression stirred something in Rachel's heart. She had seen that look in the eyes of refugees who came to the station, people who had lost homes and families and were waiting for the universe to take one more thing from them. Rachel took a slow breath and did something she would never have expected. She walked closer. Tommy and Oliver watched her with tense anticipation. Ember did not move, did not react, simply watched as Rachel approached. "You understand me, don't you?" Rachel asked. Ember nodded. "You're intelligent. Fully sentient." Another nod. "And you've been living here in secret because you're afraid of what will happen if anyone finds out." Ember's eyes closed briefly, and she made a sound like distant thunder. It was unmistakably affirmative. Rachel looked at her son, then at Oliver, then back at the dragon. She should report this. It was the responsible thing to do. But responsibility had to be weighed against compassion. And looking into Ember's ancient, tired eyes, Rachel could not bring herself to betray this creature who had clearly suffered enough. "How long has this been going on?" Rachel asked. 3 weeks, Tommy admitted. "We read comics together every night. She loves stories, Mom. She understands them. She feels them." "Show me," Rachel said. Tommy's face brightened. He grabbed one of his favorite comics. A story about a lost explorer who finds friendship with an alien creature on a remote planet. He read it aloud, and Rachel watched Ember's reactions. The dragon's expressions were subtle but unmistakable. When the explorer was lonely, Ember's eyes dimmed. When he made a friend, her scales seemed to shimmer brighter. When the story ended with the explorer choosing to stay with his new companion rather than return home, Ember made that musical sound again, and Rachel understood it meant happiness. "She's beautiful," Rachel heard herself say. Ember's head turned toward her, eyes wide with surprise. "I mean it," Rachel continued. "You're beautiful and sad and lonely, and I'm sorry for whatever brought you here. But you can't stay hidden forever. Eventually, someone else will find you. Someone who might not be as understanding as us." The dragon's head lowered until it nearly touched the floor. The defeat in that gesture broke Rachel's heart. "However," Rachel added, "I think we have some time to figure this out properly. Tommy, you'll continue your visits, but I'm coming with you. Oliver, you'll keep monitoring the security systems to make sure nobody else stumbles onto this bay. And Ember, you're going to have to trust us to help you." Tommy threw his arms around his mother. "Thank you, Mom." "Thank you." Oliver looked relieved. Mrs. Foster, I promise we'll be careful. Rachel knelt down so she was at Tommy's eye level. This stays between us for now. Not your friends, not my coworkers, nobody. Understood? I already promised, Tommy said seriously. Good. Now I believe you were in the middle of a story? Tommy grinned and picked up where he had left off. Rachel sat down beside Oliver on the supply crate, and together they watched a young boy share his imagination with a dragon who had forgotten what it meant to hope. But even as the story unfolded, even as Ember's eyes brightened with each page, none of them noticed the faint energy signature that pulsed through the cargo bay's walls. They did not see the readings that appeared on Captain Vincent Drake's security console 3 levels away. They did not know that their secret was already unraveling. Captain Drake stared at his monitor with narrowed eyes. Section D7 was supposed to be empty. The energy signature he was detecting made no sense. It was massive, biological, and unlike anything in the station's database. He tapped his communicator. Drake to Security Team Alpha. We have an anomaly in Section D7. Assemble a recon unit and meet me there in 10 minutes. Come armed, but keep weapons holstered unless I give the order. Something is in that cargo bay and I want to know what. The captain stood and checked his sidearm. Whatever was down there had been hiding for a while, which meant it was either smart or dangerous. Probably both. He just hoped they could handle it without anyone getting hurt. In the cargo bay, Tommy finished his story. Ember made her happy sound, and Rachel smiled despite her lingering worry. Oliver poured another cup of coffee, and for a brief moment, everything felt safe. Then the cargo bay doors opened. Captain Drake stood in the doorway with 4 security officers behind him, all wearing tactical gear and carrying plasma rifles. The captain's eyes went wide as he took in the scene. The dragon, the civilians, the comic books scattered across the floor. Nobody moved, Drake said, his hand moving to his weapon. Ember rose to her full height, wings spreading wide, filling the cargo bay with her presence. She positioned herself between the security team and the humans, a protective stance that was unmistakable. A low growl rumbled from her throat, and for the first time since Oliver had met her, Ember looked truly dangerous. Stand down, Drake shouted, his officers raising their rifles. No! Tommy screamed, running forward. Don't hurt her.
She's my friend.
Rachel grabbed Tommy, pulling him back. Oliver stood frozen, his mind racing for a solution. This was the moment they had dreaded, and now it was happening and everything was falling apart. Captain Drake, Rachel said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Please lower your weapons. The dragon is not hostile. She's been here for months without incident. You've known about this? Drake's face flushed with anger. There's an unregistered alien creature on this station and you've been hiding it? She's not a threat, Oliver said, finding his voice. Her name is Ember and she's intelligent and peaceful. We were going to report this, but we needed time to understand the situation first. That was not your decision to make, Drake said, but his hand had not moved to his weapon yet. He was looking at Ember, really looking at her. The dragon had not attacked. Despite her threatening posture, despite her size and obvious power, she had not made a single aggressive move toward the security team. She was protecting the humans behind her. She's shielding them, one of the officers said, lowering his rifle slightly. That's a defensive stance, not offensive. Drake studied the scene more carefully. The comic books. The thermos of coffee. The supply crate used as a makeshift seat. This was not a containment situation. This was a meeting place. A friendship. Tommy Chen, right? Drake said, looking at the boy. You're the kid who won the station's art contest last month. Your drawing of the hydroponics bay was excellent. Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his face. Please don't take her away. She's lonely and scared and she just needs friends. The comics make her happy. She understands the stories. She understands everything. Drake looked at Ember again. The dragon's golden eyes met his, and in them, he saw the same thing Rachel had seen. Intelligence, awareness, and a deep, weary sadness that spoke of long years and hard travels. Lower your weapons, Drake ordered his team. Sir? One officer questioned. I said lower them. That's an order. The security team complied, though they kept their hands near their holsters. Drake stepped forward slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. Ember watched him approach but did not retreat. My daughter loves dragons, Drake said quietly. She has stuffed animals and posters and watches every fantasy movie she can find. She's about your age, Tommy. I think she would be fascinated by this. He stopped a few meters from Ember and looked up at her massive form. "I'm going to need to report this," Drake continued. "I don't have a choice about that. But how I report it matters. I can call in a containment team and have you sedated and locked in a research facility. Or I can call in someone who might actually help. Someone who specializes in xenobiology and first contact situations." "Dr. Patricia Wells," Rachel said immediately. "She's the head of the station's xenobiology department. She's brilliant and compassionate," Drake nodded. "Wells is a good choice. She'll approach this scientifically but ethically." He looked at Tommy. "But I need to know something first. Has this dragon given any indication of why she's here or what she wants?" Tommy wiped his tears and looked up at Ember. "Can you show them?" "The way you showed me." Tommy arrived at the cargo bay the next evening with a backpack so stuffed with comic books that he could barely zip it closed. Oliver was already there, sitting on his usual supply crate with his thermos of coffee. The dragon, whom Tommy had started calling Ember after a character in one of his favorite stories, waited in her spot with what Oliver had learned to recognize as anticipation. "I brought 20 issues tonight," Tommy announced, dumping the contents of his backpack onto the floor. Colorful magazines spread across the metal surface like a rainbow. "I have adventure stories, space operas, fantasy quests, and even some funny ones about superhero pets." Ember's massive head lowered until her snout was just inches from the pile of comics. Her golden eyes scanned the covers with an intensity that made Oliver wonder what she was thinking. Did she understand the stories, or was she simply fascinated by the colors and images? He got his answer when Ember carefully selected one particular comic with her claw and slid it toward Tommy. "The Starbound Chronicles, issue 12. Tommy read. "Good choice. This is where Captain Nova finally makes peace with the Crystalline Empire." He opened the comic and began reading aloud, his young voice filling the cargo bay with tales of distant worlds and brave heroes. Oliver watched Ember as Tommy read. The dragon's eyes never left the pages. When Tommy showed her the illustrations, she leaned closer. When the story reached its climax, her tail twitched with what seemed like excitement, and when the hero sacrificed himself to save his crew, Oliver could have sworn he saw moisture gathering in those ancient golden eyes. "Are you crying?" Tommy asked, noticing the same thing. Ember turned her head away, but not before Oliver saw her expression. It was unmistakably sadness. The dragon understood every word, every emotion, every sacrifice in that simple comic book story. She did not just comprehend the language, she felt it. Tommy reached out and gently touched one of Ember's scales. "It's okay to cry. I cried too when I first read this issue. But don't worry, Captain Nova comes back in issue 15. His consciousness was saved in the ship's computer." The dragon's eyes swung back to Tommy, and for the first time since Oliver had discovered her, Ember made a sound beyond breathing, or that single laugh. It was a soft musical tone that vibrated through the cargo bay. Tommy grinned. "Was that a happy sound?" the boy asked. Ember nodded, and Tommy launched into an explanation of the next 8 issues in the series, complete with dramatic gestures and sound effects. Oliver found himself smiling. For the first time in years, this cold metal station felt almost like home. They fell into a pattern over the following weeks. Tommy would arrive each evening with new comics. Sometimes Oliver brought snacks that they would share. Ember never ate much, just small offerings that she accepted with surprising delicacy for such a massive creature. Tommy did most of the talking, reading stories and asking Ember questions that she would answer with nods, head shakes, or those musical sounds that seemed to convey complex emotions. Oliver learned that Ember could understand questions and respond to them. When Tommy asked if she came from far away, she nodded. When he asked if she missed her home, she lowered her head and made a sound like wind through empty halls. When he asked if she was glad they found her, she touched Tommy's hand with the tip of one claw, gentle as a butterfly landing on a flower, but their secret could not last forever. Rachel Foster had noticed her son's strange behavior. Tommy was never home in the evenings anymore. He claimed to be studying at the station library or playing with friends, but Rachel was not convinced. She worked long hours in the hydroponics bay, tending the plants that provided fresh food for the station's residents, but she always made time to check on Tommy. Something was different about him lately. He seemed happier, more animated, but also more secretive. One evening, Rachel decided to follow him. She watched from a distance as Tommy made his way through the less traveled corridors of the station, Heading toward section D7, the sealed section, Rachel's concern grew into alarm. What was her son doing in a restricted area? She followed quietly, staying far enough back that Tommy would not notice her. When Tommy entered the cargo bay, Rachel waited a few moments before approaching. She heard voices, Tommy's voice and a deeper voice she recognized as Oliver Hayes, the night shift janitor. But there was something else. A sound she could not identify. Musical and deep and utterly alien. Rachel entered her security override code and slipped through the cargo bay doors.